Listen carefully. We don't have much time. The scary thing is right outside the door, and it's gonna get in here any minute. But before we talk more about the scary thing, I have to tell you about something that happened 6 years ago. I'm Addison Peacock.
And I'm the scary thing outside the door, Henry Galley. You'll find more about the true nature of my origin and motives in part 19.
And this is a video about NoSleep stories.
Yes, so this is We Are Not Alive. If you're new here, welcome.
Bit of Addison and Henry lore. The way that we met was we both were working for the NoSleep podcast. For many years, we both worked on the NoSleep podcast. You as a writer, me as an actor and occasional writer. And you wrote how many stories for the podcast, Henry?
43, under my own name, at least. There were a few that I wrote under the pseudonym H.G. Ran when I needed more money that week.
That's really funny. I wrote one story for the podcast under my own name, one under a pen name, and I performed as an actor in 246.
And obviously, this isn't even counting the stories that we wrote on the r/NoSleep subreddit under different names that never made it onto the podcast, or the countless stories that we read on there for pleasure back in its heyday of the mid to late 2010s. Suffice to say, we're qualified. But we didn't want to just go at this on vibes and sound like a pair of back in my day sort of nostalgic types. We wanted to have a more, at least reasonably scientific method of getting into this. So I'm going to explain what we did. Science. We took the top 5 stories of the last year of NoSleep, which we think is both far enough back that it's given them time to accrue audiences, but recent enough that they are a reasonable representation of what you can expect from the subreddit and what its audience likes today. And we read through all 5 of them, took notes, and we are going to go up the list of 5 from the least upvotes of the top 5 to the most upvotes. And we're going to give a little mini review of each. We will have linked all 5 stories down in the description below, and we encourage you to go and check out all of them, form your own opinions, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, tell us what you thought of them in the comments, and let us know what your favorite and least favorite one is as well. And with that qualification in mind, would you like to get us started, Addison? What is the title of our first story?
So the first story that we're covering, which is number 5 out of the top 5, is my sister's ex-boyfriend keeps showing up at family events. She's been dead for 2 years.
And it has 7.2k upvote. I want to say before we get into discussing both the sort of logline and the plot of it and getting into the substance of our review, I misread its title initially and thought it was scarier than it was.
Did you think it said he's been dead for 2 years?
Yeah, I thought the dead person was still showing up at family events, I thought was like, okay, that's pretty scary, but it's like, oh no, it's just the ex lingering.
I thought that too, and then I reread the title. I had the exact same experience. I was like, oh my god, that's so interesting. And then it's still interesting in its own right. It's just, I also made myself think it would be a scarier premise, and then was like, oh, he's just a guy.
So, speaking of the premise, it's very much there in the title, but our main character's sister, Lisa, has recently died during a hiking incident. There's a bit of a bizarre, prose choice, where in the first-person narration of this brother, he's like, it's almost poetic how she died falling into that ravine. And I thought that was weirdly funny in how inappropriate it was.
What a wild thing to say.
Is how she would have wanted to go, tumbling into the dark, screaming onto jagged rocks.
Slipping and falling into a ravine on a hiking trail.
But we are also then given the context of, before she died, she had a kind of shitty, very controlling ex-boyfriend called Matt, who she maybe didn't recognize some of the red flags of what a dodgy relationship they were in. And the rest of the family didn't like him, and eventually she dumped him, and he continued to be weird on the periphery. And then after she died, he turned up at their house at the wake with flowers, and has since then been insinuating himself into all of the family's major functions. Yeah. And because the parents are very racked by grief, they don't do much to resist him, and then things get weird and sinister with the tension between him and the brother narrators relationship.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed the setup part of this more than the latter part, because the way that Matt conducts himself to me, like, felt like the most weirdly grounded part of the story. It was sort of this, like, kind of familiar behavior patterns and things to people who've interacted with folks who, I don't know if I would call it, like, always folks who I would even class as abusers, but, like, people who fall into this sort of, like, toxic, manipulative behavior pattern, this sort of like it's like he's doing this kind of weird grief tourism to the family.
Yeah, he feels like a real bad dude is the thing.
I even made a note of it. Like when it talks about him showing up at the door with the flowers, there's one line choice that I really liked. It said his head tilted like he was trying to look vulnerable. I really liked that. That's a very like immediate sort of sense of like he is sort of feigning this vulnerability while being very transparently not.
Yeah, it's a well-observed piece of character work, and I think the prose, while not really drawing attention to itself, is quite strong as well. It's very utilitarian, it gets the job done, and yeah, I completely agree with you, Addison, that Matt, the boyfriend, does feel like a well-observed piece of character work. I think especially before the story gets into what is the true element of its horror premise, you almost get the sense that this story came into existence because the author knew someone like that at some point.
He feels like a real guy. I think that honestly, as the story gets deeper into the more overt horror, it's where it kind of gets in its own way.
Yeah, it's that Russian sleep experiment syndrome, where it's very like weird and eerie to begin with, because despite the weakness in how that one is written, there's almost this sense of, well, there were some pretty horrifying experiments done in World War II and the Cold War, and then at the end, you have that infamous, like, we are the ones you'll try to sedate out of existence.
We are the darkness inside of you.
Exactly, that just kills any sense of verisimilitude it has, because for those who haven't read along with the story and are just here to have us dissect it in greater detail, what kind of begins to happen is the confrontation between Matt and the narrator, who I'm not ever sure we really get a name for, heats up, and Matt starts bringing this recurring thing up of, she told me things that she wouldn't tell anyone else. She told me things that probably not even you know.
Yes.
That initially seems like it might be like a weird manipulative flex, but over time you kind of get that it's more of a sinister thing.
Here's the other thing is, I think that the thing that bummed me out about this story is that it sort of got me and then it sort of fizzled out very quickly.
It fumbled the ball when it had it.
Because I wrote down, I really liked the bit where he's talking to the brother, the narrator, and he's like, she told me things, and the brother's finally like what? Like, what did she tell you? And he says, like, how she wasn't scared to die.
Oh, yeah, that had a very, like, Link Mungo quality.
Yeah, that made me feel...
It was really spooky.
That was really a really unnerving line. And this sort of insistence he has about, like, she told me to let her go. If she slipped, why didn't she scream? She wanted to die. Like, that's really dark and fucked up. And then... But
also feels in a very, like, Joe from You way, a very, like, consistent with how a very manipulative person might reframe events where they were like a perpetrator in their mind as well.
Yes.
Clearly they wanted this because they didn't, like, you know, put up the token resistance, or they didn't tell me this or that.
No, exactly.
So it was okay. If I may just step on my NoSleep moderation high horse for a second, which will be very familiar to anyone who watched that first video. What really bums me out is, this is a story that, even exactly as written, would be better if it was posted somewhere that wasn't NoSleep. Can you guess why I'd say that, Addison?
Why?
Because if this was posted literally anywhere else, it would leave a kind of frightening bit of ambiguity open that maybe we were dealing with an unreliable narrator brother who was taking us along for a ride, that maybe he had treated his own sister terribly and was simply reframing Matt this way to make us dislike him, and then Matt is saying, like, hey, she told me things in a very pointed way, and the brother starts to panic about that maybe it's kind of like a Feston situation where it's like, he knows about some abuse that went on behind closed doors, and the brother is freaked out that he's going to tell, but I automatically know that wouldn't be the case.
Because it's not allowed to happen in this stupid... Yeah.
Exactly, the really dumb no-sleep rules that say that the narrator can never be a victimizer. It took that other potential layer of kind of domestic horror darkness out of the runnings.
It took a bit of the sort of ambiguity and the questions that you ask as a reader as you read. I also... A twist that is not a twist to me, or a twist that... Am I dumb, or did the ending make no sense?
Yeah, so, again, for those who haven't read... Okay. It is basically heavily implied through what Matt says that
he killed her.
Yeah. He pushed her or chased her on the hike in a way that caused her to fall into the ravine. And throughout this, the brother has been invading his dead sister's privacy by looking through her diary to try and find some hint or, like, smoking gun that Matt had, done something that caused her death, which Matt then confirms. But at the very end, after Matt confesses this, he disappears. No one can find any trace of him. His bedroom was completely empty when they went to go to check his, last known address. And then there is a note added to the back of the sister's diary that says he wasn't watching, he was inside.
It doesn't say was. This matters that I tweaked this. It's
not,
oh yeah, sorry,
please say.
It's he's not watching, he's inside. Which means it's different meaning, very different meaning.
Yeah, which is really strange, because
what does it mean?
Yeah, this was written in here after the sister died. I saw there was a lot of interpretation work going on in the comments, some people saying...
Yeah, someone in the comments was like, the X is a metaphor for depression. I'm like, I don't think so.
Because it's one of those things that's don't get me wrong, we're not anti-intellectual here. We don't have problems with things having a metaphorical meaning in fiction, but the way to make that work is it has to work both as a metaphor and as a literal feature of the story for something like that to be carried off, and it doesn't work in that way.
The whole reveal, I guess, is just he's inside the house, I guess? Is that the point of that?
But even then, who left the note? Why would he leave that?
I think the sister's ghost.
And what were the weird details about him disappearing?
Did the sister's go? Here was something I thought I saw somebody say that I'm like, this might actually be what the thing was trying to say, is that did he also die on the hike? Did they both fall and Matt's been a ghost?
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things where it's inherently that problem of an open-ended ending can work, but this is so open-ended that it just makes you feel kind of baffled. And as studies have shown, I love citing this, Addison, feel free to groan at me because you've heard this much more than the audience.
It's okay, I like it. It makes me laugh.
They have done studies. Confusion is the biggest immersion breaker in fiction.
It's true.
So to have that at the end kills what should be a big punch.
And I feel bad because I don't... Okay, I had to check because I was like, am I dumb?
This is us Matt is such an effective manipulator that he's gaslighting us outside of the fiction.
Oh my god, he got us.
He's so good. And, maybe this is a number 19 is entrapped her situation. Feel free to tell us what you think was the deal with Matt and Lisa down in the comments. Maybe it's it's a metaphor for how Matt Groening ruined the character of Lisa Simpson over time in The Simpsons.
I don't think that Matt is a metaphor for depression, by the way. I do think that Matt is intended to be what he reads as, which is like a domestic abuser. My best guess is that we're thinking too hard about it, and the sister's ghost is warning him that Matt is inside the house.
Yeah. And then through the vein of how NoSleep storytelling works, narrator Brother Man sat down and wrote the story and submitted it. He was then killed by Matt.
Do you know what else? I'm going to say something too. This story would be much better if it just ended with Matt disappearing.
Yeah, because it's then just a murderous man is in the wind, and we don't know when he'll come back. And that could be frightening in a very it could happen to you kind of way.
Yeah, I was expecting it to just end with when he sort of, gets a sort of pseudo confession out of him, and them going and being like, his apartment's cleared out, his stuff is gone, we don't know where he is. And I was like expecting it to end there, and then I saw that there was more, and I was like, oh, a Wham line. And then I read the Wham line, and it made me go, huh?
Which, by the way, I think is an excellent segue to our next story. What was the title, Addison?
My favorite story of the lineup, the title was, this was the best title too, My Neighbor Has Been Beckoning My Children from His Window at Night. Reading that out loud gave me a little shiver.
Ugh. Yeah, it has 7.6k upvotes. Deserves way more, in my opinion. This was phenomenal.
I read this in my room with my cat, and a cup of coffee, all the lights on, sun outside, and it still gave me the little, ugh.
No, same. I read it mid-morning because of the Australia-LA time difference, and it still spooked me legitimately. Genuinely, if you're watching this and you just enjoy horror fiction, of any of the stories on this list, if you were going to pause and go check it out, do that, because it would be a real bummer for us to spoil what just an eerie one this is. So this story, I think, immediately made a really interesting choice because of all the stories, I think it has the most informal prose. There is a story that we'll get to that has way worse prose, but this, in a way that is a stylistic choice, reads more like a Reddit post than a piece of literature.
I'm a really huge enjoyer of, even though I know a lot of them are fake or rage bait or whatever, I read a lot of Am I the Asshole, and I read a lot of r/relationship advice. And this was formatted like a relationship advice post, because it had the I, 33M, live in Texas with my daughter Alicia, 8F, and my son Jay, 4M. It's like the classic Reddit post formatting. And it, to me, this was a really, really good use of the medium. We are on Reddit. I'm going to format this like a Reddit post. And it was a really fun choice, because I think sometimes if a NoSleep story feels a little bit too writerly, it can kind of mess with the sort of original premise of NoSleep, which is the idea of pretending it's real. And so this one was so fun to me, to read. This one felt the most nostalgic to me.
No, I completely agree, because you told your story of how you encountered NoSleep for the first time earlier. Mine is much more embarrassing, that I think I first discovered it through shameless reposts by home-trained therapist and child slave owner Sixpence on Tumblr.
Oh, and, Sixpence!
Yeah, and the ones that she posted most of the time were these ones that had a bit of a sense of eerie realism. Again, verisimilitude is really the best way of putting it. This whole story, if you want a vibe for it in one sentence, and you'll completely get this, Addison, because I know you are also a big fan of this particular gentleman's work, but it had some of the energy of The Neighbor's Window / The Window Next Door by Junji Ito.
Yes!
Which I think what's really fun is it did that, but without the supernatural twist. But I will say, what I really like about this story is that it does what I think a lot of really good stories do, in that it plays the source and nature of the horror very close to its chest, and keeps you in that state of frightful ambiguity for the longest time. So, Addison, would you like to give us the plot?
Absolutely. I would love to. I also want to share that at the start of each of these stories, I wrote a prediction of what I thought the twist was going to be.
Oh, I didn't even know she was doing that. So what was this one?
For the sister's ex-boyfriend one, by the way, my note that I wrote is I just wrote, he killed her, and I was right. For this one, I wrote, and I was wrong, which was delightful. I wrote, because I've seen a version of this twist before, I wrote, prediction, the neighbor hanged himself and the kids are seeing his corpse.
Yeah. No, that's a classic.
Because that's a classic, right? So I just was like, let me just write this prediction.
Blow the dust off it. That's vintage. Excellent
exactly.
year.
I was thrilled that I was wrong. Okay, so the premise of this is a single father living with his young children, 8-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, are living in a townhouse, I believe, or it doesn't really matter. They're living in a house in a 2-bedroom, and he is awoken by his young son, crying and saying that the man in the house next door is making scary faces at him through the window. And yeah, that made my stomach go bleh. And at first, when he checks, he doesn't see anything out the window. There's curtains pulled shut, and the sister, the daughter, says that she didn't see anything. So he's like, okay, I don't know. And the son, I should say, has a reputation at this point for like having a lot of nightmares. And there's this detail I really loved. I even made a note of it that I thought
the
was such a
TMNT
grounded
tent.
little- Yes, that's such a real thing. There's a detail that the little boy has this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles indoor camping tent that he likes to sleep in, and he prefers it to his bed. And the dad is kind of like, did he make up this scary thing because he wanted an excuse to sleep in the tent?
This feels like a real Texas dad wrote this.
It does. And he lets the kid, because he's scared, sleep in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tent in his room. Like in the dad's room with him, but in the tent. And then after 2 nights of that, his daughter wakes him up. And she says, the neighbor was making faces at me. And that made my stomach, by the way, when I was reading it, my stomach went bloop.
Yeah, no, again, it's so simple, but so effective.
And then this bit where I'm actually going to read an excerpt because this really freaked me out. He asks what the man was doing, and she's like, and she does the face. And it says, I won't do justice by describing it, but it looked something like this. She smiled with both sets of teeth, so there was a little open sliver between the rows, and then she furrowed her eyebrows. She inclined her head towards me, kind of Kubrick stare-esque, and strained the muscles in her neck. The worst part, though, is what she did with her hands. She held out her left arm, forearm up. Then she clenched her right hand into a fist and moved it back and forth rapidly over her forearm. Poor thing described it as playing the violin, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that my neighbor was pantomiming cutting. That's so creepy. By the way, I read that sort of not very carefully at first and just as a bit of levity. At first, I thought that the writer was trying to imply the man was jerking off.
Oh no! I mean, to be fair, you just say levity, but a dude staring at the kids.
It's levity. Oh, no. It's levity because I was wrong.
Yeah, no, it's true.
That's what I mean is I read that, went, ugh, and then reread it and went, oh, wait.
That's the thing. It's a matter of it's kind of a different kind of terrifying depending on which way you look at it. But no, that is a really frightening little paragraph. And I don't know about you, Addison, but while I was reading that, I was instinctually, like, with my face, doing what she was describing to picture what that was like. And
Yes.
this also, I'm going to introduce another slight bit of levity that fans of this channel will love. The thing with the teeth made me think a little bit of that one moment in SpongeBob where Squidward's teeth extend forward to get that tiny bit of Krabby Patty when SpongeBob makes him try it.
That's really funny. Also, I know this story was good and I enjoyed it because it's nighttime where I am and I keep looking at my window and being like, what the fuck?
Oh, no.
There's nothing there. Why am I doing that? Anyway.
Yeah, it's why we feel the need to keep making these jokes.
And he's talking about how he's never really met his neighbor. His neighbor's this man in his 40s. He's really reclusive. They haven't spoken much. And he's like, he seemed normal. And then he asked Alicia if the neighbor made any other gestures. And she said it was the beckoning, the come here motion with both of her hands. That's so fucking creepy.
That's terrifying.
So he basically, this is a longer story. This might be one of the longest of the lineup.
I think the longest was Hyde. That one was,
Okay,
it took
but
me
this
a
is the
long time to
second-
scroll through.
This is the second longest. And he's like, I'm going to go confront this guy. And this was a detail that freaked me out, so I wrote it down. As he walks, he goes to the front door and he's like, hey man, like what the fuck? No one answers the door. But he's like, as I was walking away, I turned and saw the guy at the front window before he ducked beneath the sill and out of view.
The thing is, it's one of those things where you might be listening to this and being like, okay, yeah, we get it. This got a big reaction out of you two, especially if you haven't read it. Like, how was it scarier than the other one, which also had this sort of, like, implied threat? And I think it's both in the very straightforward nature of the prose, lends it that urban legend, like, friend of a friend quality. But on top of that, the fact that this is a little bit of a longer one, but is really well paced, lets that tension sit. And that, I think, is a really good technique.
There's also more, I think it's actually a really good compare and contrast between this one and the previous one is like, Matt is being a weirdo and a creep and a dick in a way that is very familiar. This is just enough outside the norm of like interactions with people who are threatening.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the fact that the way that this guy is described as moving feels very, like, uncanny and inscrutable. The
Yes.
real life people that you encounter that will like freak you out the most, whether they're actually like a dangerous person or just like a harmless oddball, are people who behave in a way where you can't quite get a read on them.
Yeah, like the thing about Matt, I think, is that he's very like that made him like threatening if he were it's one of those where I'm like, Matt is a guy who's scary if he were real, but like is behaving in a relatively straightforward way. Like, I had a read on Matt very quickly. I'm like, this guy's an abusive guy. He's enjoying twisting the grief knife in this family. Like it's a very specific. Whereas this, I'm like, what the fuck does this guy want? What is he doing? What the fuck is he doing? Like, what is it? Like, it's the uncertainty of motive
that makes him really bizarre and frightening. And
yes,
believe me when we say the payoff is worth the build-up in this one. Would you like to take us home on this, Addison?
Yes, I
the
would.
Absolutely terrifying final sequence of this.
Yes, I would. Okay, so the narrator stays up watching Midnight Mass. He goes out of his way to say that, which I just thought was funny. We both thought that was funny. We're both like, hell yeah, man.
I've got to say, like, I think part of the reason this was so funny to me is, like, man, if I had to do something to keep myself, like, alert and to pass the time while I was potentially waiting to see a creeper who was being weird to my kids through the window at night, I wouldn't be watching a horror series.
No, literally, I was thinking the same.
I'd maybe put on, like, Peep Show or something.
No, I would be watching, like, The Simpsons. I was like, dude, that's a wild pick. That's why it made me laugh. Also, I don't know if you instinctively did this too, but it's like they hear a noise and I made the noise. The, like, sound to beckon a horse.
It's so scary! It's
really
so
creepy.
scary!
And they're like, okay, he's like, okay, fuck this, the guy is there, and he opens the window, he looks, he sees the guy sees him, the man looks enraged, he slams his window shut, closes his curtains, and then grabs his gun, he's like ready for this, and trying to just describe, he calls 911, and then through the closed curtains, through the curtains, he can see the figure of the neighbor outside the house, and he raises his arms, but his
The neighbor
arms
raises the arms.
Yes, the neighbor raises his arms, but they are double length, able to reach up and hit on the high up window where they are. And he keeps banging on the window with these long, long arms. But that's very scary, but it's a bit of a cliche. The police show up. The guy runs away. And then the officers go inside and check out the neighbor's house. I love this bit. I'm sorry, I keep reading excerpts from this one.
No, you should, because it's great.
I'm not sure what they found inside that house. All I know is that when they emerged a few moments later, they both looked very disturbed. When I went outside to ask what they had found, the female officer told me simply, "Your neighbor's dead." The rest of the night was a blur of strangers in uniforms filing in and out of my neighbor's home. Some came to my porch afterwards to ask me questions, and none offered me any answers. They moved with tight-lipped efficiency, their faces guarded, their words clipped. At one point I wandered to the side of the house and found several people photographing something on the ground outside my bedroom window. Before they could ask me to leave, I made out the gruesome shape of 2 human arms.
That in itself would be horrifying last lines, but it somehow manages to go on a little bit longer and have even scarier last lines.
Yeah, the last lines is, they're like, we moved out of the house, I've been staying with my kids at my parents' apartment, I want to sell it, but like, how are we going to sell the house? Who would want a house that, thanks to the news, has become permanently associated with phrases like dismemberment and days of torture and victim barely recognizable as human?
And that is so amazingly terrifying because it adds one of, I know, both Addison and mine's favorite things, fridge horror. Of realizing not only was a terrifying serial killer staring out of the window and having designs on this guy's kids and his family this whole time, he has been implicitly torturing the neighbor this entire time. And I would say that this isn't directly said, but I think it's heavily implied. The killer's rage at the end when the dad sees him through the window is, oh, the game's over now. I've got to finally kill this guy and move on.
Yep.
Nightmare fuel!
Oh, and the fact that he's been, like, basically, like, pantomiming to the kids, like, I'm cutting this guy's arms off. It's, like, so fucking creepy and
Yeah,
weird.
like, I'm cutting this guy's arms off. Come see. Maybe I'll do yours afterwards.
Like, ugh, I hate it. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, this is a great little piece of horror. Kudos to the author. I'm not going to say any author names in this one, because A, you can go find it for yourselves, and B, because we're going to be a little bit more critical of some of the other stories, we don't want to feel like we're putting anyone on blast, because at the end of the day, we've all written, like, bad stuff before.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of the journey, it's part of the process, and we don't want to put anyone on blast in this. We just want to give out honest appraisal of the stories, which...
Absolutely.
Is a good segue, sadly, to the next one. What's the title, Addison?
From my favorite to my least favorite. I thought my boyfriend was the love of my life until I discovered he was drugging me at night. Also, I'm gonna say something. This, as a headline, as a clickbait, happening way too close to the Giselle Pellico trial for my personal taste.
Oh no, that's deeply unfortunate.
And I don't know if that was on purpose, but I'm like, I read that title and I was like really upset because I was worried about the potential implications of that.
I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on this thing because much stranger coincidences have happened.
No, and that's true.
But it's not a great starting point. 8.3k upvotes, by the way. So a substantially, by an order of thousands, more upvotes than the one we just described. And,
also,
you know...
I'm not going to tell you what my prediction was because it was exactly right.
Yep. So this is a bit of a you know what you get on the tin kind of story here. Mm-hmm. And for me, the biggest weakness of this one is not its like predictability mm-hmm. or its like hackneyed premise, but the fact that the prose is just god awful. Like I imagine that as Gus is editing mm-hmm. this video from beyond the grave, that he's likely putting screen caps of these excerpts that we read off screen. Mm-hmm. But I have to read this part. So all the context that you need going in, this is not a complex plot, is the classic, the main character wakes up feeling tired no matter what time she goes to sleep, and she often has bruises or mysterious wounds mm-hmm. on her body. And she develops this connection of, wait, my boyfriend brings me chamomile tea every night. And these symptoms started to manifest not long after he moved in with me. Yeah. Could he be, like, drugging me and doing something untoward? So she goes to a doctor.
Yes.
The doctor is like, well, you don't seem to have any disorders, but I'll refer you to a hospital. Which, by the way, is just a bad piece of storytelling.
By the way, Henry, I made a note about
the
doctor. I made a note about the doctor thing because it annoyed me. I was like, she mentions that they gave her a bunch of tests, and she says specifically because the boyfriend's like, I think it's because you're under too much stress. She's like, they even gave me a stress test. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not what a stress test is. So I looked it up. A stress test is not related to testing your levels of stress. A stress test is a thing you give someone that may or may not have have symptoms of coronary artery disease or an irregular heartbeat. It's a test you do where you test the stress on the heart to see if they have a heart condition. This person thinks, the person who wrote this story thinks a stress test is just testing how stressed you are.
And deeply funny that they didn't look that up afterwards.
I just needed to
before they posted it.
Clarify that because there's nothing to indicate in this story that she suspects she has a heart condition. So I'm left being forced to conclude that the writer thought that a stress test meant they were testing your levels of stress.
Which actually cues up the bit that I wanted to read out loud.
Oh, please.
Because this is...
Sorry, I'm being
This was bad on the page, but the full awkwardness of it you're going to see when I read it. The doctor at the hospital took my blood and did all sorts of tests on me, including a stress test. I should have been happy when the test came back clear, but it only made me feel like I was losing my mind. Something was definitely wrong with me. Quote, I would prescribe you sedatives, but your blood work shows you are already on nitrazepam, explained the doctor. I was dumbstruck and wasn't sure what the doctor was talking about. Quote, with a weird space between the quotation mark and the dialogue. I have never taken so much as a painkiller in my life, which, weird flex, but okay.
Yeah.
The doctor's face looked how I felt. He took out his charts and looked over them again. No, you definitely tested positive for nitrazepam, which is a powerful sedative. Like,
by the way,
it's just so profoundly awkward.
by the way, there's like some wild punctuation in this one. I like wrote down some of it because I was like, what are you? I was obsessed with when the boyfriend came in and asked what's wrong, but it ended with a comma instead of a question mark. Anyway, but I'm obsessed with this particular scene because I can't stop thinking about the idea of a doctor that would, when you go to the doctor, they're like, what medications are you taking? And that would not be like, hey, how come you said you weren't taking any medicines, but you have a sedative in your blood?
Yeah, that would immediately raise alarm bells. This is one of those horror stories that kind of take place in idiot world.
Yes, I was gonna say,
where no one really behaves like they should.
It's one of my things that I always get mad at. A lot of two-sentence horror stories are very guilty of this, is I have a really hard time with horror fiction that requires me to believe in a world where, like, everyone's stupid.
Yeah, and I think this feels particularly stark given that in the previous story, our Texas dad actually was extremely, like, responsible and intelligent as both a dad and a horror protagonist.
Oh, the whiplash from that story to this one was like, whoa.
Yeah, because again, crucially, the dad in the previous story, this is not a Abed sensible horror movie situation where he was like John Wick under pressure.
No,
he's very afraid, and they sell that, but he keeps it cool. He does all of the right things in all of the right times, and it makes him and his kid's survival feel really earned at the end. Whereas everyone in this feels really dumb, because even though in the way that I kind of gave you the premise before, it makes it seem like she asked for these tests out of suspicion. Here is a passage that comes after the bit I just read later that night. As I sat there, Stephen walked in with my chamomile tea, and just as I was about to put it to my lips, I was struck by the most unnerving thought. The realization that my boyfriend was drugging me hit me like a ton of bricks and filled me with a dread I had never felt before. I emptied the contents of the cup down the sink in the bathroom before jumping back into bed. Now, the painful cliche of the hit me like a ton of bricks aside, it's like, man, this is when you realize this was a possibility?
No, like, girl, what do you mean?
Yeah, this is the most naive character. Also, let's be real, the doctor would be like, woman with sketchy kind of, like, skittish boyfriend comes in. She's like, weird stuff's been happening to me at night. I'm not on any medication. We found a powerful sedative in your blood. The doctor is going to put 1 and 2 together here.
Well, no, because this story takes place in a world where nobody has critical thinking skills. But I'm obsessed with this bit. I have to read the part that I'm obsessed with, where I think she forgot, the writer forgot what tense they were writing in.
Yeah. Oh, it's nuts.
Okay, so what the hell was he doing to me in my sleep, I thought? I had made the decision to go to the police, but I needed evidence, or it was just my word against his. Also, that's not true. You have evidence. You're being drugged and you have bruises. But
yeah,
I had purchased a hidden camera and set it up in the bedroom, pointing it towards the bed. I woke up exhausted as usual, which unfortunately meant you had done something to me while I slept. Girl, who were you talking?
And I was like, don't accuse me, I wasn't there. I don't even know you.
I literally copied and pasted that into my notes document and wrote, girl, who are you talking to?
Yeah, just like, I frankly do not take kindly to being accused of this while reading my stories.
Girl, who are you talking to?
This meant you had done something to me while I was sleeping.
Also, okay, so now I'll read you the prediction I wrote in my notes. At the start of my notes, I wrote, he's drugging her to keep her from changing into a monster.
So I have to tell you something really funny, Addison, and this is another perfect example of, like, dudes jacking off on the windowsill happening here. I was so checked out of this story that as I went towards the end, my, like, brain, like, flitted towards the last line, which is, like...
No, don't spoil it. I hate that line. I want to talk about it.
Okay, well, send us to that line, and then I will tell you what I thought happened for a second.
Because I want to get to that, because I have thoughts on that line. Anyway, in the video footage, she crawls up the bedroom wall and onto the ceiling, like, The Exorcist style. And then Steven pulls a stick out from under the bed and fucking fights her possessed ass off with the stick. then handcuffs her to the bed, which means at some point he must handcuff her before she wakes up, or she would wake up handcuffed, which doesn't make sense, but that's okay.
It's also like, what's the point of drugging her if this happens? Oh, wait, no, because she poured it down the sink.
It's because she didn't take the drugs. So Steven is like, she's like, why didn't you tell me what you were going through every night? And Steven's like, I thought you knew, which is, what the fuck, dude? What do you thought she knew and you were drugging her anyway? So that's its own thing.
And she never mentioned it?
Yeah. And also the fact that he's like, and usually the drugs made things a little easier. It's like, you were drugging her without her knowledge, regardless of whether she was doing a scary
beating her
thing.
with a stick.
Like, that's actually not cool, even if your girlfriend's a demon, by the way. It's actually not okay to drug people without their consent, even if they're demons.
Yeah, the secret to a good relationship is communication.
And she's like, why are you still with me? And he says, my last girlfriend was a jealous psychopath. You're a walk in the park compared to her. So this whole stupid fucking story, ends with a, women, am I right? Wah, wah.
Yeah, the whole thing becomes like a boomer Facebook meme, which is really surreal. Now, Addison, with that said, I have to tell you what I thought was happening.
Tell me what you thought.
Very checked out. As I was reading the last scene, my eyes flitted down to that last line in advance, and before I read the bit in the middle and connected the two, I thought this guy's ex-girlfriend was coming in at night and beating the shit out of the main woman's sleeping body.
That would be such a better, such a crazy twist. Side note, I had to verify something to myself. The person who wrote that story, shockingly, a man.
It was such an immersive look into the woman mind that I was fooled for a second there.
That's the thing, right, is we're reading it and being like, why wouldn't she think of the... And the answer is because the person who wrote this is a man and they didn't think about it that hard.
It's one of those things where it's also just kind of in poor taste that, like, let's call it what it is here. It's
yes.
The title definitely is there to make you think that this woman is being assaulted in her sleep, and then plays it off almost as a joke to then have like a goofy, like, oh, she's a demon and he's actually a good boyfriend.
Yeah, and like, that makes me feel really yucky and mad, and like, I'm like a bit that, like, not only is I think this the worst written of the stories on there, but it's the only one that actively pissed me off. I was like, oh, this fucking sucks, man.
Yeah, which hilariously, I think the top comment is someone just saying, Lamau, this story sucks ass, which is really funny.
That's really funny that comment is still there. That's a comment from 5 months ago.
Yeah. It's just odd that one is more popular than the really good horror story before it. We are now going into our penultimate story. What is the title of it, Addison?
A message appeared on every screen in the world. Hide.
This had 12k upvotes. It's an interesting mixed bag. I think this, from our like preliminary conversation, I think this is one that you might be a little bit kinder to than I am. Just because I've had to experience more Chuck Wendig.
I was going to say, I think this hits on some of your more particular pet peeves. And I think that, I'm going to be honest, maybe I was really nice. I was also some of this is about, the context in which you read the stories. So reading this immediately after the fuck-ass boyfriend drugging me story made me immediately just be, like, so much nicer to it. Because I was like, oh, thank God it's not that.
Yeah, no, that is extremely fair. And the thing is, I think... what immediately hits you in the face from this story, for better or for worse...
This is the one that is the most written.
Yeah, it has a very writerly narrative voice. It's the only one in here that has, like, rampant italicization, M-dashes, lots of M-dashes, many kind of, like, weird little asides.
Not too much on M-dashes now, Henry.
Like, look, we all use them sometimes. We all do. But there is so much kind of... we pointed earlier to the bizarreness of the one Midnight Mass reference in the Someone is Looking Out the Window. This story is so full of bizarre, out-of-place pop culture references and jokes. Honestly, I say Chuck Wendig, but the writer that I could compare it most to is... it is a lot like... Jason Pargin, aka David Wong of Cracked, and like John dies at the end.
I don't know who that is, and then you said his fake name, and I went, oh, that guy.
Oh, I get it. We're using our made-up names. I am Spider-Man. But yeah, it is one of those things where it has a distinctly 2010s flavor to it. I
Oh,
think
do you know
to
what it is?
what is it?
I was doing no, why I enjoyed it more than you, I think, is I was doing I was doing the 50 Shades of Grey thing where where I was beating someone with a whip. No, but I was doing the 50 Shades of Grey thing where I just was sort of mentally taking the narrator's voiceover out
Yes, I get exactly what you mean.
and reading the events of the story.
And don't get me wrong, there's still, even in the dialogue, characters say stuff like, "Oh, do this thing in the Monopoly game we're playing, or I'll kill your face." Just very like of its time. I think to me, pop like I'll be completely vulnerable here.
It has a certain je ne sais Rick and Morty to it. What?
Yeah, not wrong, not wrong. The thing is, part of the reason why I think this sort of hit me in particular more than you, and we'll get into its premise in a sec, but it gave me a little bit of fuck all because I used to write like a lot of prose stories in that kind of like very like self-consciously trying to be like funny and quirky.
Oh, absolutely get that. Get the fuck or from I get the fuck or more from people that are trying to be Chuck Palahniuk because I was trying to be him as well, or Palahniuk.
Same.
Anyway, the premise. What's the premise of this story, Henry?
Yeah, so the premise of this, a lot of people were comparing it to things like
Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, Alice in Borderland, As the Gods Will, Squid
Can I
Game.
tell you what I would compare it to?
What would you compare it to?
This is gonna make it sound like I hated it more than I did. I didn't. I actually enjoyed a lot of this story, but it was King's Game.
Yeah, no, it has a very anime quality to it because there's a little bit of like Darwin's Game and High Rise Invasion to it. It is a very anime death game type thing, which we'll perhaps discuss a little bit later for some reason. But
I really disagreed with the premise that it was Black Mirror adjacent. Someone in the comments compared it to Black Mirror, and I was like, no, it's not. It's supernatural. How is it Black Mirror?
I mean, to be fair, Black Mirror has dipped its toe into that with like
Yes.
Demon 79 and stuff like that. I think maybe they got the Black Mirror comp from, in particular, Shut Up and Dance, the episode with Alex
Oh, that's
Luthor and
fair.
Jerome Flynn, where they're being
fair,
like
but that was-
blackmailed to do stuff.
But that was such a grounded episode comparatively, I guess.
Yeah,
It's
it's
fine.
true. It's true. Again, it has this very anime premise of a group of friends who are playing Monopoly. AJ, Hero with an I, Evelyn, and Ravi are playing a game of Monopoly when every single screen in the apartment that they're playing it with, phone screens, TV screens, all start showing the word hide on a white background with sort of black, slightly archaic font. Which also, I will admit, definitely made me think of the like big stylized gothic L from Death Note. Whenever he's like talking through a
Well, they
computer.
do take an
Again,
L.
massive anime. They do take an L. Massive anime vibes from
Definitely.
this. And we are both weeb trash here, so we'd never hold that against
I don't hold
someone.
that against them at all.
And they're all sort of wondering, what does this mean? Honestly, the other thing it has a real big vibes of is a lot of analog horror stuff, like Local 58.
There was a not Magnus Archives, not that. There was a Mandela catalog energy to some of it.
Yes, yeah, because it very much deals in the sort of cosmic horror of what is happening here will never be understood by these characters. They can just do their best to
And survive, yeah.
follow the instructions. So the thing says hide, and initially they're like, okay, is it a hack? Is it like viral marketing for a new movie?
It's funny because sometimes the dialogue hit me right and sometimes it didn't. Like, I even wrote down there were lines that I really enjoyed. There was a line that I liked. I don't know where it is right now, but it was like where they're like, is it viral marketing? And they're like, I don't think that's Lionsgate's purview. I was like, that actually made me chuckle.
That's the thing. I think I don't want to sound like I'm being too much of a Debbie Downer on this story either, because it has some really interesting ideas, and I think there are points where not only does it have like effective imagery and concepts used effectively, there are also times when it's casual style and when its characters like sort of quirky, almost you're the expert in her, Addison, so you can tell me if this is fair or not. Almost sort of like Diablo Cody-esque dialogue really works.
Some of it does, I think, cross into a Diablo Cody kind of zone. I don't know if it quite gets there, but I do get what you
Yeah,
mean.
it's not like full, like, Juno-style stylization.
I'll say, I said, or when I messaged Henry before we got on the mic, I said I liked 1.5 of these stories, and this is the story that I consider to be a half, because there is as much in it that I liked as there is stuff I didn't like.
Yeah, so to kind of get back into the plot and where it sort of begins to show its hand in an interesting way, one by one, after stewing in the paranoia for a bit, they're all like, okay, well, maybe this is real. What would we have to lose by hiding for a bit? So they all, like, huddle in a closet.
It's Evelyn who's like, come get in the closet with me. Just come on.
Evelyn, whose, like, big thing is that she's kind of like a technophobe. She's less of a, like, phone user and stuff than the rest of them. But she's the first to say, yeah, let's get in the closet. And they're all in there, and they're all thinking, oh, this is all gonna, like, seem so dumb if this is, like, a War of the Worlds, Orson Welles broadcast situation, and it was all a big hoax. But then one of the neighbors comes to the apartment and is like, hey, I've been getting this message on my phone, it's on my TV, viewed a similar thing. And they go out, and this, I think, is the first moment where it gets legitimately frightening.
This scared me.
Where they drop all jokes, and the narrator just describes it as feeling like just a presence is in the house outside the door. And the woman outside immediately falls silent. And the presence is there, just a palpable sense of dread for, like, a brief period. And then the hide disappears from all the phones. They feel okay again, which is the first kind of interesting cosmic indication that what is going on here has the ability to control their mindsets and emotions as well as the technology, which will be relevant later. One of them goes to check the door, look through the peephole, and the neighbor who was at the door has been absolutely eviscerated. She has kind of spontaneous style just, like, blown up outside the door.
The word that the narrator used was skewered, which was nasty. I liked that.
Yeah, and decimated.
And then they said, like just, oh god, what was it? An explosion of blood in the hallway.
Yeah, she has become a smear.
Yeah, she's a red smear on the carpet.
Exactly. Until she was a small red stain. But yeah, it's one of those things where we have no idea what happened to her, just that it was gory and horrible. And they're desperately trying to, like, look into it. And there's this really effective scene where, as he's going through the channels, he comes across, like, a football game where obviously none of the people were in a position where they could have hid, and just on the field and in the stands is just... It's just a gore fest from when all of these people have gotten got by whatever is the force sending this.
They get told to hide again, and then we get the bit that really did scare me the most of the whole story. They get the word again. And at first they're like, should we hide in the same place? And they're like, absolutely not. Imagine if you're playing hide and seek, you shouldn't hide. You'll get caught if you hide in the same place again.
Yeah.
And that made my stomach drop a little bit. And then they were like, they split up to go to different hiding spots. Evelyn and Hero go to the bedroom to hide under the bed. One goes in the utility closet, one goes in the laundry closet. Robbie goes in the laundry closet, and AJ goes in the utility closet, and the door won't click shut.
It's really tense. Again, this does have a very Squid Game quality to it.
Yes, and as he's holding the door shut, he says, I felt a light tug at the door. Ugh. That made my stomach go, bleh. And then it stops again, and the warning goes away, and Ravi's like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, what the fuck, and then everybody comes out, and they were all okay. They get another message. This one says, break time. I don't know
it just sounds like the story that Meg has often told of that person encountering her sister.
Wine time.
Yeah, wine time. But no, that's the thing. It's the break time comes out, and they all start to be like, okay, someone in here is clearly in on it. They've got information, and they start to turn against each other. And then one of them realizes, no, break time means this is the time when someone is going to have a breakdown. They are influencing our minds. They are trying to turn us against each other, and we need to actively resist it. It is really clever and well thought out. Genuinely, my only bone to pick with this is that I wish it had at times just toned down the sort of quirkiness of the prose to let the horror breathe a little bit more, because when it's scary, and it's very involving. You keep reading, you want to know what's going to happen.
It's true. I actually wrote the same thing. I was like, this is happening too fast.
Yeah, it is kind of jarring how quickly they go, like, they turn against each other, but when it reveals that it's like this is being done to them by an external force, it's like, oh, okay, that's clever. And then I believe the next command that comes up is seek.
That made my stomach go, "Ah."
It's like the world's deadliest episode of Game Changers, where they need to figure out the rules as it's going on.
No, literally. The only way to win is by learning. The only way to learn is by playing.
You're gonna drop out of life. Anyway, so they get given the command seek, and they try to figure out what that means, and they desperately realize that all of the screens are suddenly broken. So what they need to seek is a working screen to find the next command, to follow it and do it and not die. So we have this incredibly tense scavenger hunt as they're like tearing apart the house to find, I believe, Ravi's phone?
Ravi's is the one.
Because it's the one that isn't there. And when they see it, and again, us recounting this does not do the tension of it in the story justice, which is why we really do recommend you read these. It's maybe a little bit too late now, but this is why you should have done it. That they find the phone and it says smile on it with a counter, and they all desperately like get in the same room and have to force a smile before it then goes to the next command.
And the next command, and this one made me roll my eyes a little bit. I'm sorry. Point to sacrifice made me go, okay.
Yeah, it's another thing where, again, it shows its hand too much. It's what's been effective about the one so far is that they've been so simple.
That's what I was saying. Like, I wish it had said, like, choose.
Yeah, that would have been, I think, a better one, but the wording is, I will say, in the author's defense, for a very specific reason.
I know,
because
I know.
They all decide to do a kind of, like, Katniss and Peter at the Hunger Games with the berries, and be like, no, we're going to do this house rules, which is a reference earlier to something they said about how they played Monopoly, and they all point to themselves, but with only a minute left on the timer, they realize that the neighbor, in a sense, unknowingly sacrificed herself to teach them what the stakes of the game were, so they all go outside and point at the neighbor's remains.
Yeah, and then the game is over and it says, good game.
Yeah, and they all just kind of go back to playing Monopoly in this shell-shocked state with sort of no idea.
I really liked the ending.
Yeah, do you know what this feels like?
What?
This feels like a pretty good Netflix original horror movie that you'd put on just to be some fluff in the background, but like you kind of get into it as it goes along.
It also feels, to me, earnestly like a really good, like horror short.
Yeah, no, it could be a good short, but I could also see it expand, like, I would love this, not to, like, keep doing dropout references in this, but, like, this in the hands of, like, Josh Rubin, I think could be a really good, like, single location horror movie.
Yeah, I think it's all in the execution, and I think also another thing that I need to reveal about myself that I don't know if we've talked about on this channel that, like, will also make sense for why I, like, was maybe more into this one than you were, is that I really love an evil game. Like, one of my favorite kind of cliche premises for a horror movie is I love a movie with an evil game in it. I love that shit so much. I think it's so fun.
No, it can be really fun. Another movie that I watched, if you want an extremely low-budget evil game movie, this one we saw on Tubi. It's only an hour long. Me, Meg, and Zooey sat around and watched the film Live Scream, which is actually fun as hell. It's just a dude downloading a horror game to play in front of his, like, very small Twitch audience. And I won't tell you any more than that, but it's a really good horror movie.
I love evil games. I love an evil game movie. I love them when they're good, and I love them when they're bad. Truth or dare.
Yeah. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, we love talking about stuff that we love. And even when we're negative about things like this, it never comes from a sense of wanting to, like, tear down anyone's creative expression. It comes from wanting these things to be the best that they can be.
Unless your creative expression is about how women be crazy, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you that. I hate your story.
Speaking of crazy women, though...
That's a...
I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to find a better segue than that. We wanted to take a very quick little break to discuss a little bit of our own writing, which is kind of intrinsically tied into our past with NoSleep. Don't click off. I see you reaching for it. Don't tab over. We will literally be 2 minutes. Addison?
So Henry and I met working on the NoSleep podcast, as we've mentioned, and we decided to create a podcast of our own. We teamed up and created another show that is, I think, just as bloody, or perhaps bloodier, but otherwise extremely different. It is not a horror podcast, though there are some horrifying elements. That is Killjam Triple X.
Yes, Killjam Triple X. It is our bizarre, satirical, cyberpunk death game show about the star of the world's most popular blood sport, Faustina Fettermine, played by Addison, who has her life ruined one day by circumstances that we don't want to spoil here, and has to fight her way back to the top with the help of her extremely unscrupulous manager, Bellamy Pink, played by a dear friend of ours and friend of the show, Zooey LeFou, who you've probably heard if you're a regular here.
Yeah, so if you enjoy character-driven stories with expansively built worlds, and if you like women with all kinds of weird shit going on and things that are wrong with them, then you'll really like Killjam Triple X.
It's true, we're so good at writing them because there's so much wrong with us, and we just channel that, and we put it into the thing. So if you've been listening to this and been thinking, or, you know, watching it, which we know is rarer, we're part of the tab over gang here, we're so aware about it.
I know
but if you've been listening to this and been thinking, oh, you know, I kind of like how these guys approach writing, I like their philosophy, I like their comedy, then you can hear all of that in a much more polished, crazy, all singing, all dancing form with Killjam Triple X. You can find it right here on YouTube. In the description, there are links, or you can go to killjamxxx.com. That is killjamxxx.com to find all of our feeds for Spotify, Apple Podcast, and beyond. Thank you for indulging us in this little diversion. Back to the spookies. We are now going to take a look at the top story of the last year on r/NoSleep and see if we really feel it's earned that position. But don't worry, regardless of how we feel about this one here, Addison, I believe, has compiled a list of some of her favorite classics from the subreddit to check out afterwards, so that if you feel like it ended with a wet fart rather than a stupendous bang, we've still got some entertaining further reading for you to go check out and reminisce about the good old days with us oldsters on our rocking chairs on the porch.
I also needed to prove that I'm not a hater. Okay.
No, exactly, because again, like we said, we prefer to love things than hate them. It's a better use of our time. But anyway.
I died for 6 minutes in 2003. Heaven isn't what we think it is.
Ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Ooh, heaven is a place on earth.
It's not. Anyway, so, okay, all right.
Gotta pull the Band-Aid off, Addison.
It's a short one. Okay, so the premise is, at age 15, the narrator is basically collapses while walking home from the bus stop, had like I believe a heart attack, and collapsed and died for 6 minutes. So while they were dead, they, got a glimpse of the afterlife. There's the bright white light. It's like, oh wow, how nice, the bright white light, passing through the gates. And they're like, oh, okay, pass through the gates and the white light, and then they're in like another plane of existence. I do like the way they describe this. They're like, it only made sense while I occupied it. I don't believe a corporeal being can make sense of the astral plane. Something about its intangible existence defies translation. Like, I appreciate the kind of bit of like being like, it is an alien feeling I can't articulate. There was some decent metaphysical prose in this. I think that the actual like prose of this story is not bad. I just really don't care for the story itself. But they're greeted by life forms that at first they're like angels. And then I felt myself shackled by their powers like a collared dog. Humiliation and terror came over me. These were not the ethereal beings I'd been led to believe await us. These were cruel, unsympathetic overlords by whom I was fettered. And then they're laughing at him and they're like, let me tell you a metaphysical villain monologue about how the universe works. There is not enough energy in the universe, and the universe is a farm used to produce souls that only arise in the conditions found in our cosmos, and it was designed that way. We are being raised to be slaves to spiritual beings after we die.
This feels like ranting that you would have seen on a kind of Time Cube style, like GeoCities website coded by someone off their meds in 2003.
Like 6 minutes in heaven. They picked 6 minutes because 7 minutes in heaven is funny.
Yeah.
Felt like a lifetime which I spent amusing what I perceived to be a childlike spirit with a penchant for psychologically distressing manipulation. It batted me around like a cat with a caught mouse, reveling in the pain it produced. I think I also didn't like how, I think if you're gonna go for this concept, I think maybe you need to go all the way and like actually tell stories that aren't just sort of like vague hints at stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's one of those...
Because a lot of the stories just being like, it was bad.
Yeah, I think that is a real problem with this, because when you give people the premise of the afterlife is not what it seems, or in this case, heaven, the reveal of that being, what we think of as angels are actually really mean, is a really played out concept.
Yes.
And it's something that, especially when, as you were pointing out, the details of their meanness aren't super evocative. And it's like, yeah, they were really mean to me, and believe me, soul pain is even worse than normal pain. And
no, exactly. It was just like, they were mean, and they laughed at me, and it was bad. I'm like, okay.
Like, I'll admit, part of me was a little bit predisposed to not take this seriously, because I feel like this is based on, that there is a book called Heaven is for Real, which was written about a child who claimed to have died and seen heaven, and that child's name is Colton Burpo, which imagining that perhaps this narrator is in fact a boy called Colton Burpo, which... The funny thing is, the reason that I found out about that name, sorry for this little tangent here, but this story is just not that interesting. The reason I found out about that is that someone had edited an interview that kid did, and they changed his name to Brumpo Tungus. And when I looked into that, because I knew about Brumpo Tungus first, I was like, how is that ultimately less stupid than Colton Burpo?
How is it less funny
than
the real name?
It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think...
Okay, so the last reveal, the last bit of this story, it's, again, that's the other thing is, it's not really, it's kind of barely a story. It's kind of barely a story. It's basically like a bad thing happened, it was really bad.
Yeah, it's one of those things where and Gus was kind of making fun of. It's the whole, event consequence. It's the barest minimum of what you need to be allowed here.
Yes, but, anyway, they're like... When it became clear my time had not yet expired on Earth and I was to return, I was told not to reveal their existence to the rest of my kind. You know what would have been really cool? Any dialogue from the angels. Anyway.
Yeah.
My reward, they communicated to me, would be a marginally improved station among the slave population. Also, some of this wording, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, he again, the thing is, I feel bad saying it, but, as someone who has studied cases like Kyle Odom, that dude who started to believe everyone was Martians after he had a mental breakdown in college and shot a priest 10 times, this prose has the quality of delusion to it. Do you know what I mean? There's a very particular kind of, I want to say, Alex Jonesian way to write about this stuff.
And again, I think also... this story would maybe not annoy me as much if there was any like dialogue in it, instead of him just being like, I met a guy and he said something to me and I said something back to him, and I'm like, okay, what did you say?
Yeah, tell us the ending.
He meets, I assume, Colton Burpo. He says the author of a nonfiction book recounting their near-death experience visited my hometown. I attended a reading and confronted him about the tale. I looked him in the eye and asked him if he really met God. He smiled and nodded, assuring me that yes, God is real and filled with love. On a lark, I decided to tell him that I knew the truth, that slavery awaits us all. A flicker in his gaze betrayed his knowledge of the fact. He really had died and visited the afterlife, but lied about it in his book because he knew. Because he knew the truth of heaven, the horrible place our souls are bound for.
Yeah, like, okay, so, again, if this is something that someone finds, like, deeply affecting, I'm not going to take that away from them, because like you said at the start of the video,
No, totally.
fear is a very subjective and personal thing.
I think the thing for me is, this is well-trodden ground, and it has been done a lot better.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why, and to be honest, a story like this pretty reliably went like viral on NoSleep every year back in the day. I even remember the NoSleep podcast produced one of them. It was something to the effect of, my brother died and he kept talking. And it was him just describing how actually like horrible the afterlife is. But again, in much greater and more evocative detail.
Yeah, I remember enjoying that one.
So I think if you like the concept of this story but found it to be lacking, then maybe that's one to go and hunt down and check out. But I think so...
Sorry, there's a comment on this story from someone who I think doesn't know what NoSleep is, trying to proselytize to this person.
I saw that one, and the thing about comments like that is, that I think cuts to the heart of why this one got to where it did, because, like, again, not to put your people on blast here, Addison, but this to me feels like such a deeply American story to be afraid of.
Yes.
Where, like, I think a level of, like, cultural Christianity is assumed. Because it's a case of, it's like, you know, we can never forget that Americans' origin story is that all of the craziest religious people from England who couldn't chill left.
They came here.
And went to bother other people about it. And I think as a result, even people who aren't actively religious have a kind of deep cultural Christianity in a lot of cases, which I think makes these ideas... It's the same reason that you'd have a lot of, like, classic creepypasta, even really terrible ones like Sonic.exe. You would have, like, the Wham line being Sonic saying, I am God, at the end.
Man, there's somebody in the comments of that story who's like, I believe it. When I died, I experienced the same thing. And I know this about parallel dimensions and all this stuff. And I'm like, see, you were right. This is a person who, oh, you did something here, man.
Again, I feel bad saying it, but it is attracting people who, and I feel the right to say this because, you know, as someone through my own illnesses have suffered delusions relating to, like, health and my body and disease in the past, I say this without judgment. There is a certain kind of brain that this kind of idea sets a bit of a fire in.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that you or me, Addison, who have suffered from health anxiety, our sort of, like, maladaptive thought patterns could be set off by seeing certain things related to that in media, that there are certain people who have ideas like this, very metaphysical fears and obsessions that I think can be easily activated by things like this, which I think is part of the reason this took off. And I think, frankly, the other reason why it got as popular as it did, just in terms of upvotes, is that it's short and it's not a challenging read.
That's true.
I think the longer a thing is, just because people are busy and, you know, TikTok has fucked all of our attention spans, most longer stories people are going to click on and be like, I ain't got time for that. But a little one like this is very accessible to quickly read through. And if you're people like who aren't like us and aren't very dyed-in-the-wool horror fans who find things like this more novel because they haven't read 20 stories before that had different, more interesting takes on this premise, they might think, ooh, that's a bit spooky, in a really kind of makes you think sort of way.
And I did write down, and I mean this both I meant this both in a bitchy way and also in a for real way. I wrote, this is baby's first philosophical horror.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it is ultimately the fact that this is a deeply accessible story is a big reason why it took off. I think because people often use the phrase lowest common denominator as an insult, they forget that it's ultimately a very neutral thing in the things that don't, for whatever reason, put up barriers to entry will have more people in them than things that do.
It's true. Also, and I'll say this too, like, I didn't care for this story at all, but, like, it didn't make me mad, like the boyfriend drugging one.
Yeah.
So whatever.
That's the thing. I think before we get into our list of ones that we enjoy, I think to return to the question...
I want to talk about my favorites. Yeah.
From looking at these 5 stories, and if you guys have enjoyed this video, maybe we'll check out more to, like, expand our data set, but we figured the 5 top ones is a decent one. So yeah, let us know in the comments if you'd like more videos like this from me and Addison on the channel.
I would be delighted to.
I think it is fair to say that since these new rules have been instituted, since a lot of the most prestigious authors on there have been kind of chased off, there has been a clear rot in the quality of stories. Like, 1 out of 5 to be like, oh, this is one that we would emphatically say is good, is not a great average.
For what are the top 5 of the year, yeah.
Yeah, it does show that I think the rules and the way that this place has been run has had a detrimental effect overall.
Literally, not only has it... We talked about this off mic, but when I was compiling my list of my favorite NoSleep stories, one of my favorite series from NoSleep, which was a horror comedy series called Tales from the Gas Station, is gone, and it's been removed by the moderators.
Yeah, which is a huge bummer, and thankfully, and we'll get Gus to include this as a link in the description, we have an audio version of it that someone made.
Yeah, there's an audiobook of it.
But outside of that, it is a real shame that we're seeing the subreddit erase its own history.
Yeah, and like, I tried to look into it. As far as I can tell, if someone knows something I don't, and the stories were removed by moderators because the guy did something bad, let me know. But I'm pretty sure it seems like there's no controversy around the stories. It seems like they were just pulled because the rules of the subreddit changed.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that says it all. But to end on a positive note, Addison, let's give us a quick-fire kind of reading list for people to check out of ones that you think are great stories that are worth people's time.
I've got a mix of some that are properly classic from, like, over a decade ago, and then I've actually got some that are from, like, 2 or 3 years ago, so a little bit more recent. Okay, so my one of my favorite classics is... everybody who knows NoSleep probably knows these, but I love... They're classics for a reason. The Search and Rescue series.
Oh, yeah. No, they are really phenomenal little kind of anthology micro-fictions that play on some wonderful fears. And I will say, while the Channel Zero adaptation series Butcher's Block was very different to the original stories, I still believe it's interesting and worth checking out in its own right.
Oh, Henry, you know how much I love Channel Zero. And... I love those. Yeah, I love Search and Rescue Woods. Awesome. The Smiling Man. Classic.
Yes.
The Smiling Man is one of those, like we were talking about before, that really plays on that fear of, like, when a person behaves in a very, like, unpredictable and, like, sort of, yeah, like, unpredictable and unusual way.
Yeah, and the chances are, if you've read a bad story about someone, like, being stalked by some smiling weirdo, it's because the person was inspired by how effective and simple this one is.
Smiling Man freaked me the fuck out. I just think that it's one of the best, like, in terms of the way that its imagery is so vivid. There's the Pen Pal series.
Yep, that's another really eerie one by, I believe he's called Dathan Auerbach, and you can actually buy that as a self-published paperback novel.
It is, yeah. I think Pen Pal is one of my favorite non-supernatural no-sleep stories. I really enjoy Pen Pal. Room 733 was one of my favorites for a long time, still is.
By friend of the show, C.K. Walker.
Yes. I love Room 733. It was the winner of Scariest Story 2015. I enjoyed it so much. Let's see, that one's great. Tales from the Gas Station can be found other places, thankfully.
Yep, check out the link in the description.
And then my more recent ones that I really like are, there is from, I say more recent, this is from 6 years ago, but My Sugar Daddy Asks Me for Weird Favors.
Which I believe is top of all time?
It's one of the top of all time. It has, how many upvotes?
It's a great rule.
It has 73,000. Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. To give you a sense of how much the upvotes have declined on that subreddit.
Yeah.
Because after a certain period, you can't upvote stories anymore. So that's not like it's accumulated them forever. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like it's been being upvoted for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm. And then my last three favorites from 6 years ago, Something Walks Whistling Past My House Every Night at 3:03.
That's another very eerie one that I think is, in many ways, almost a kind of a happy medium between the person in the window and Hyde.
Yes. I sing this one's praises all the time. From 3 years ago, my wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture.
It is terrifying. It loses its way a tiny bit towards the end when...
It does, but it's...
But up until then, it's terrifying.
And then one that I just read recently, off a recommendation from somebody, I think a spiritual friend to my wife has been peeking at me around corners. Henry, have you read Has Your Husband Been Standing Still?
I don't think I have. In fact, after this call, I'm going to immediately read it.
I think you should. It scared the fuck out of me. Anyway.
Oh boy. Well, if that's not an endorsement to check that out, as I will, I don't know what is.
Anyway, so those are some of my favorites. There are others that I haven't even gotten to yet. Like, I always really enjoyed the series of The Woman Holding an Orange. I think, yeah, those are some of my favorites. There are no sleep classics that I'm not a super fan of, so I didn't include those, but those are like kind of some of my go-to faves, and I hope that they give you some thrills and chills.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for checking out this video. We really appreciate it. Again, any criticism here was really done in good faith, and on the whole, we congratulate all of these authors, even the ones that we ragged on for having the bravery to finish a story and putting it out there. Again, if you'd like to see some of our very thoroughly modern writing and acting and production and all that, go check out Killjam XXX and the Kingmaker Histories on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. I've been Henry Galley.
And I've been Addison Peacock.
And I'm finally going to get through that door. Prepare to die, Addison!
No!